6, but everybody sent in a bunch at the last minute, which is super helpful. I just wanted to jump right into it. We have a lot of games from the chess study group Discord, which I think is great. It's a great place to get to learn a little bit more chess, and very helpful of this Discord to send in a bunch of games for me to review. Cool. So we're looking first at Emmett's game, and this is I think this is Croc's game, right? Sometimes I get the names confused, but yeah. So this is Croc's game. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Ghoul Ghost. I appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah. So here, it's a Vienna game. We've looked a little bit at the Vienna game. Basically against against this move F4. We have figured out. Hey, Squash, how are you? Welcome to the stream. Um, I think that Jen has I think I just uploaded a custom emote to the stream that Jen created, so I'm sort of curious to see if you guys can use that or not. But it is there. Hey, welcome, Jack. Yeah, so here, we basically have, we have this pawn structure, and after having looked at this for a long period of time, we basically decided that there was only one real playable move here, and it's not the most frequently played in a lot of games. I mean, here it's about a 90% possibility, but everything other than d5 here leads to an advantage for white. It really is like that clear. Like, it's a set point 0.7 pawn advantage, so it really is a big difference. So black should play d5. It's his one option, but he doesn't. So here, basically, white can already start to cement his lead. The first move is bishop to c4, most popular. I think engine analysis is suggesting e5. So this is interesting. This Falkbeer Gambit Vienna game is interesting and complicated. It's interesting that this e5 move is so clearly the refutation according to the engine, but it's not the most popularly played move. Um, in situations like these, what was actually played in the game was e5, I believe, and e5 is the the engine's best, right? This is the only move that provides an advantage against pawn takes f4, but it does. It basically generates an advantage of almost a pawn, and forces black to make some kind of responsive move, either queen e7 or knight g8. Everywhere else is covered, right? All of the other escape squares for the knight are covered. So so queen e7 or knight g8 are practically forced. Um, Black plays queen e7, and I think we should come up with the refuting line for queen e7. Queen e2, knight g8, d4, queen h4, king d1. It looks a little weird to move the king so early in the game, but this leads to a two pawn advantage for the white according to the engine. So basically, good position, strong position. So against queen e7, that's the move. And alternatively, black can play knight g8. That's considered to be slightly better. And on knight g8, white plays knight f3. Black may play queen e7 or d6. But hey, Aphelion, how are you? How's it going? Um, yeah. So here, knight f3. Basically, keeps this attack, intact. That f4 pawn is going to be a problem. Um, Yeah, so g4 is important. Also, g5, g4 are kind of the normal King's Gambit type pawn moves, which white is also going to have to pay attention to. I'm thinking moves like d4 relatively early, followed by bishop takes f4 could be good. But yeah, I mean, each of these sidelines has specifics to it. But we really have studied this opening a good amount. And hey everyone, hey Ahmet, how are you? But yeah, so we've studied this line a good amount, and we've determined that out of this line, d5 is very objectively the best. We know this. So against pawn takes f4, the response is e5, and then knight g8 or queen e7, either one. But say knight g8, which is slightly more common, f3. or knight f3. And white's showing up almost a pawn. D6 is best for black, but white has a very comfortable position, and we'll get probably with d4 we'll get back this f4 pawn pretty quickly. Let's go through the game. E5, queen e7, queen e2, knight g8, knight f3, knight c6, and white's showing a big positional advantage. I'm looking at knight to e5 already. Knight to e5 forces queen to d8 pretty clearly. So this basically tactic is good for white. I mean, that knight's going to get posted, and especially since the knight can't go to f6, that knight basically white can immediately win back that pawn if he wants to. Knight e5, queen d8, knight takes f5 or f4 is an option that's available. So anyways, there's a few different options. White chooses a solid one, d4, makes sense. And then f6 is played. So here, knight to d5 really seems to create some problems, because queen d8 is forced to prevent losing an exchange. And then yeah, so I think, yeah, in general, I think given the choice, you want to take with the bishop. Partially because this knight is already developed, and the bishop takes f4, brings another piece. Basically develops another piece. But yeah, it's not. I guess I wouldn't feel like it's extremely urgent right now. To take the f4 pawn. Black can play a move like g5, but it will really disrupt his kingside and probably not be worth it. Yeah, so I think bishop takes f4 is the way to go. Bishop takes e5. Yeah, I think long run, knight d5 is a tactic where you don't end up playing knight takes f4, but it's a choice. It's an option that you have if you really feel a need to equalize materially. D4, f6, bishop takes f4, pawn takes e5, bishop takes knight f6. Okay, I mean, white has a big positional advantage here. This game is going well. Bishop takes c7 is an interesting idea. Probably not the best. Here's what I think is probably the best idea. I think bishop takes f6 is the best idea here. Um, let's see if I don't know if the engine agrees with me, but I think bishop takes f6 is the best, because on bishop takes f6, queen takes e2, bishop takes e2, f6, knight to d5, and both the knight is forking this pawn on f6 and this pawn on c7. I guess we can play through it just because it's a little bit more extended. But queen takes, bishop takes, pawn takes, knight d5, and now that knight is checking both. Um, so that's one that's one line that is available to white here. But the engine is suggesting knight to b5. Knight to b5 is interesting. It looks like it's a fork threat supported by the bishop. My idea was kind of simplifying, but this one, yeah, it holds all the pieces on the board and attacks aggressively. Um, yeah, I mean, it's a tough question, Kira. Normally it's based on algorithms related to squares controlled, and space controlled, but sometimes at the secondary level. So the first thing the engine's calculating is material of one side relative to the other. But after that, it comes down to like control of squares and a whole bunch of complicated algorithms and stuff. I should have a better answer than that, but it's basically assessments of how many squares each side controls after tactics are taken into account. But yeah, so knight b5 I think is knight b5 I think is a slightly better move here. Black could respond with queen b4, c3, queen a5, but either way, either the bishop takes c7, trapping the queen here, or the knight takes c7, winning the rook. This is overall just too much pressure getting exerted. So right here for white, if white plays knight b5, I think there's too much pressure exerted on c7 for black to respond to. Just too many different threats. So here, bishop takes c7, bishop takes c2, and here knight to e5. Okay. So This, I think, I think basically White has played a very good game to get to this position. White's up about four pawns here, right? But he's his the eval is +4, so this is very good, if not close to winning. Um, uh, there is a tactical opportunity available here to play knight takes c7. I don't really think black can effectively stop it super well. On knight b5, knight d5, I think is probably black's best defense. And here, I'm tempted to play c4, except that's vulnerable to queen b4. I think, yeah, bishop takes c7 here. Queen takes, bishop takes, and then knight can't even recapture. So this is pretty good. A6, knight d6, I guess. King e7, but white easily extracts both of his white pieces out. Um, yeah, that those things happen. My strategy, the strategy I would recommend against high rated players, if you're like, you know, somewhere in the 1200 to 1800 range. Um, the first thing is, I think a really so. What about Queen b4 against the fork? Good question. We can just go to that. Um, so Queen b4 against this Knight b5 fork. Um, you play c3 against it, and this queen holds b2, and both now the queen's getting it. I looked at it too. I was curious. The queen is getting attacked, and so is the c7 pawn now. Queen e5 holds them both, uh, or defends them both, but first it's minor pieces, so the queen can't really defend against two minor pieces, or take there. But also bishop takes c7 wins the queen. So yeah, so basically queen b4 is a good idea, but is not does not actually work because this queen covers b2. If that queen didn't cover b2, I think it would be a good a good move. Like if the knight were on d2, or if there was some situation where the queen was on like d3 or something. But this yeah, so this defense. But no, thanks. Yeah, definitely always feel free to offer the game. No. This is not your game, Ghoul. Your game is the third one. So we're but it's in this stream. Well, it'll be in about 15 to 20 minutes. Um, but yeah, so in terms of playing this game, Jack, I think basically, I think your idea is, I think, uh, you really are significantly better here. I think the main point of, oh, okay. Um, yeah, so I guess the thing is that basically the against higher rated players, don't get psyched out. I think that high rated players get a lot of mileage out of the fact that they're high rated. I think if you play normally against them and you don't take like I honestly believe that if people didn't look at the wall chart and if the ratings weren't constantly available, lower rated players would beat higher rated players more frequently. I think there's a lot of times when people believe that they are going, basically that they're going up against a stronger player, so the stronger player isn't going to make simple mistakes. I can say from experience that stronger players make simple mistakes with some frequency. Yeah, here I'll give you the link to the Discord. Here you go, Squash. Thanks for asking. But yeah, so I don't know. I'm always sort of like treat every play the board, not the player, I guess would be the first general concept. But that's a little bit overly simplistic too, because sometimes you do want to take into the fact that your opponent has done specific opening study. But in terms of catching tactical errors, I guarantee masters make tactical errors all the time. Usually not big ones, usually for like a pawn or that kind of thing. But I've played enough master level games, I can tell you that pieces that masters hang to two move tactics are definitely a thing. Um, yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think with I didn't know that feature existed, Jack, but it's cool that it does. I would definitely turn that feature on. I would be surprised. If you're playing strong, if you expect to be playing higher rated players, turn that feature on, and you will perform better. I strongly believe that. Um, there's a lot of things in my mind that sort of work that way. Like, I think most situations where people are kind of getting by on reputation, I guess, sort of makes them overrated. Like, I guess, high rating is just a demonstration of that, and it's somewhat self-sustaining because 2200s get 1800s to throw games away all the time. Um, Anyways, the best thing you can do against high-rated players is attack them in a sound, aggressive way, and they are vulnerable. I guarantee it. At some level, they might just become objectively too strong, but 2200 isn't it. I promise. Anyways, yeah, I also think another strategy to play against highly rated players is well defined trap openings. If you have trap openings, people stop playing them against masters, so they forget them. So I think you could probably snag some really rated wins out of really high rated wins out of trap openings. I don't know if it's worth throwing away an opportunity to beat a yes, I would definitely remember that, like for sure. That is a very valuable thing to know, and I promise you that it's true. Yeah, no, they definitely do. I mean, they don't happen that frequently, but it happens frequently enough that if it looks like, if there's a two move tactic that you see, you should not play it. It is very possible that they have missed it. Yeah, no, I mean, these highest level players make fewer and fewer errors as a general rule, but they definitely still do make errors. So aggressive play against highly rated players, which is something that I think people psych themselves out of doing, can really pay off. But also trap openings. I'm not an expert with those. But some of you guys are. Definitely recommend playing like highly theoretical trap openings against highly rated players. If they know it, then good for them, and you're sort of refuted. But the percentage that don't know them is higher than you think. Um, that's definitely true because they don't see them very frequently. Someone only plays the Traxler attack against. I mean, realistically, not that many masters play knight g5, but masters don't know the Traxler attack. I know enough masters to say very few of them know that theory. Most just find a way to sidestep it. But yeah, anyways, this game is interesting. Uh, I think the main improvement here is to basically look at knight b5. Knight b5 was a tactical opportunity that I think could have really paid off here. Basically, this would have uh, interesting. Not for me, to be completely honest. I think you might be overestimating how many people. I know you guys watch YouTube and you guys follow online chess streams, but I think you'd be surprised at how many national master FM level players don't keep up on the material as well as you guys do. I mean, I think the number of high level masters I think there are many high level masters that do not keep on top of these things. I just keep that in mind. Many chess players do watch streams, but many players don't. I wish more did, because I'm a streamer. But anyways, Traxler, yeah, Traxler's pretty much new to me. I hadn't known it going into this stream, and I don't think I'm that unusual. Anyways, knight to b5 seems to be a winning tactic here. There's checking on c7 seems to be good, forking the king and rook, and yeah, and basically this yeah this looks promising. It's the best way for white to consolidate his basically turn his four pawn material edge into a into basically a more basically a consolidated material lead. Uh, Queen b4 was, by the way, we were talking about what happens with Queen b4. Queen b4 was played in this game. Or sorry, no. It wasn't. Um, so bishop takes c7, queen takes e2, bishop b4, knight e5, castles, bishop c4, king h8, knight f7, king g8. White is winning here. Materially speaking, looks like it's one pawn up for white. But just having an open king side like this and the ability to create discovered attacks is something that's worth a lot. Knight h6, king h8, knight f7. How I don't. I'm sort of just looking at the computer line here. What's the discovery that's going to happen? King g8, knight d6. Okay. King h8, castles. All right. Well, this basically is the engine line, and I do think it's winning. This knight is very well outposted at knight d6. If bishop takes it, then black gives up the bishop pair. Bishop takes d6 and threatens the rook, and basically uh, this yeah, this is going to end up being a good position for white. I want to take it back to the one situation here where black actually takes an advantage, and this is on the hanging of knight takes d4. Uh, yeah, so knight e5, knight takes d4, rook d1, knight takes c2, f2, or king d2. And yeah, this white has very advanced pieces, good piece play, but this exposed king is a problem. So I guess there's two improvements that I'd make in this game. They're both kind of tactical and not really particularly theoretical. Um, but uh, but yeah, here knight to b5. I think is a good move. This is gonna win c7. I don't think there's much of a way for black to get out of it. Knight d5, castles queenside, and then threats on the knight with c4. Um, good question. You're looking at this situation. Yeah. So this is the second thing to revisit. So bishop takes. It's a good question, Kira. So please, yeah, definitely, please keep asking them. Like super happy to address them. Knight takes d4, which basically eliminates white's center. Rook d1, knight takes c2, king d1. No, I think in terms of threats on the white king, they're not too serious. I mean, black probably castles here, and then has the open file for the rook, which is annoying, and white will have to respond with his best basically things to prevent the knight d5 discovered check. White will have to come up with the solution for. But I think bishop f3 is pretty much fine. So say, in this situation, castles bishop f3. I don't think it's an issue with the king being exposed. I think basically the issue is that the white's now down material, and black has similarly active pieces. That's the main difference here. Both neither kings have great king safety, but basically they both have similarly active pieces. Like these three versus that three, not super differentiated. So a lot of this -2 eval comes from that one pawn that black is now up directly. Anyways, two improvements. Otherwise, things were good. I think basically here there was an opportunity to play knight b5. This is mainly a tactical shot that works out. This c7, it's good. Um, Instead, bishop takes c7 got played. Not terrible, but not fully maximizing on the lead. And then the second error of this game was knight to e5, hanging the d4 pawn. If black declines to take the d4 pawn, a3 is a good response. Bishop c4, but black's up to back to being equal. A better tactical response here is d5. This causes more problems since the d4 pawn is still hanging, and black now has a double threat on the bishop and the knight and the pawn on d4. Yeah, no. So after king g1, you don't see an attack for white. Let's see. Here. Okay. So d5. Um, rook takes. All right. So here, I guess I would say knight takes d5. And then on any retaking of this knight on f7, you'll have a discovery. So like knight takes d5 here, rook takes, knight takes f6, and then you'll get at least an exchange out of it. Um, in terms of continuing the attack, this is like pretty tactical stuff. So like knight, I mean, you might have some opportunities with knight f7, but the material is equal and it's not like a super unusual position. So I think that if you can get an exchange out of this as white without losing any material, it's going to be good for you. The engine will play into this situation where basically this knight will be posted on d6. This is also fine. I mean, white's basically up a pawn with a better pawn structure and a good good basically piece positioning. Um, I think it's sort of interesting. So there's some volatility in this game, mostly tactical. This d4 pawn hanging was an issue for white. D5 was a better play for black here. Um, but I think basically, yeah, rook takes f6 is a tactical idea. But I think knight takes d5 is better. Knight takes, and this should be something that white should be able to turn into a win. Maybe knight takes e4, but then really bad problems with knight to d6. I think, or no, sorry. I was looking if there's a mate here. So knight takes d4. I wanted to see if there was a mate. Knight to g5. Yeah, knight to g5. Either I think it wins a piece, right? Because knight e6. What if king h8? King h8, then c3. Yeah, so white wins a piece out of knight g5 here. Anyways, pretty interesting. And overall, rook takes f6 is an interesting tactical shot. The goal is definitely makes sense. I mean, you're trying to tear apart the king side. But anyways, I think the main idea here is to basically maximize tactically. Rook takes f6 is the right general concept. You want to be attacking, but it requires it requires the follow up to be an accurate move. Um, yeah. So at the end of the day, I think this was an interesting game. It was probably more volatile than was ideal. Yeah, that's where I was going to steer you towards. I think this is basically a tactical game, and at the end of the day, you basically with good tactical vision, you reduce the volatility. There's so many hanging pieces here that it's basically there's so many hanging pieces that basically it creates problems. You want to be able to outcalculate your opponents in positions like this. Um, so yeah, so I'm gonna point you towards I'm gonna point you towards Puzzle Battle, Puzzle Rush, Chess Tempo. Yeah, that's the biggest improvement. Specifically that knight b5 and specifically that hanging d4. But overall, if you look at this game report, this is just choppier than it needs to be. If you're able to cut out like one or two of these chops, your rating you will win a game like this. Your rating will go up pretty significantly. And if you look at master level games, they basically the tactical vision keeps them so it doesn't bounce around like this, or it's a very unusual game where it does. So, anyways, that's my idea. I think that's the biggest takeaway. But overall, interesting, and it showed sort of what can happen in this Vienna game, Falkbeer Gambit. Falkbeer Gambit is refuted. Sorry, Falkbeer Gambit is refuted. It's d5. D5 is the winning move for black. So if anyone plays it against you, d5. Okay, on to the next game. This is a game from Gobar. Gobar was playing white. Oops. Sorry. 1 second. I'm gonna pull it out of Lee Chess and put it in chess.com. Um, But yeah, Kira's talking about Puzzle Storm, and I haven't heard much about that, but I would like to try that out. That a good free puzzle trainer is definitely a valuable thing. So, I'd like to know. I'll check it out. Um, yeah, no, uh, interesting. Yeah, I'll check out both of those. They're not ones that I'm familiar with, to be completely honest. So, Puzzle Streak, I don't know. But yeah, no, thank you very much for sending the game, Jack. I think I'm gonna steer you towards tactics for that. But overall, I guess I would say don't be afraid to attack your opponent. Knight b5 was a winning tactical move. And I think with a good amount of tactical study and the same type of situation, you'd have a better, you would get a better outcome. It's a, tactically, chess is about tactics at the end of the day. At least up until about 2200. Club chess is about tactics. That I feel comfortable saying. Okay, cool. So this is Gobar Singh's game played as white. Um, okay, he gets a big center against a flank opening, King's Indian defense. Or I guess, is it King's Indian defense? Um, modern, I guess. But basically a closed flank opening. Here, h5, e5, pawn takes, rook takes, queen g4, pawn takes, and here I think basically white gets some great opportunities. So let's slow this down and take a look at what happened exactly. It looks like basically white overwhelmed with a larger center against a closed type position. Okay, cool. Knight a6, sort of interesting. So d4 c6 first is an opening that I don't know particularly well. I think maybe with c4 you can transpose it into the Slav, but like uh, without d5. I mean, d5 by the way is an overwhelming favorite here. d5 is played in 69,000 games, and knight a6 is played in 13 games. So black is really stepping out of kind of the normal lines here by playing knight to a6. Um, okay, knight to a6, e4, g6, knight to c3, and white basically has a big center against a g6 c6 formation with knight on a6 and kind of misplaced there. Bishop g7, knight f3, knight to c7, bishop e2. Uh, White's development, I think, is healthier, and when once Black commits to a side, White will be able to attack aggressively. Castles, knight h6, h3, castles, bishop e3, f5, and I don't know, e5 maybe, or queen d2. But one of these ideas. So say, I guess probably queen d2. Um, but basically, this is going to allow White to launch a quick attack. At this point, White hasn't overextended with his pawn center, so a quick lead. Uh, basically quick attack, solid center. White has an advantage. Okay, so what's the best way to exploit this? I think it's basically straightforward development. Um, but I am curious where the engine places White's kind of shift here. I mean, basically White it completely controls the center, and the best push for Black is probably e5, but e5 needed this knight g4 tactical support to defend it. It wasn't even playable until knight g4. So with h3, knight f6, and this is really just a solid position for White. White's basically developed all of his pieces, all to reasonable squares, and the king side looks ready to attack as soon as Black castles. White plays g4, which is takes space. I don't know if that's the best move yet. I think it's probably the best move post castling. Here I might castle queenside, although I think they were saying castling kingside was better. But I'd play some type of straightforward developing move, and castling is one of them. I guess there's not really anything else. Everything else is already sort of developed. But I would play g4 after the castles. But if black castles, then you have a well-positioned g4, and you can sort of just continue on this attack. E5, pawn takes, knight e6, bishop e3, c5, d5, and here, yeah, knight d4, queen d3, bishop takes, and basically, white has a solid position. He's a little bit better here. Uh, b6, bishop d4, knight takes, um, and yeah, I guess e6, e5, they're options. But basically, I think rook g1 and then h5, h4, h5 is probably the play. Uh, yeah, so white gets basically an aggressive attack going on the king side and uses that to win the queen and mate. But yeah, let's go through this. Um, c6, c4, knight a6, e4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7. It's a good central formation for white. E5, d takes, knight e6, bishop e3. All right, fine. Um, Knight to d4, castles. So I guess, yeah, I guess this probably was an error. White should probably continue with his attack here. On castles, knight takes d5. Um, Loses this knight. So there's a discovered check from this bishop on g7 to that knight on e5, and that wins a pawn. See, so on castles, knight takes d5, and then this knight on e5 is getting attacked. So on either knight takes, bishop takes, or on pawn takes, bishop takes. Um, Either way, it's basically a winning wins a pawn for black. So I think white needs to do something to eliminate that discovered tactic. That discovered tactic isn't super easy to see. I mean, you don't normally think of discovered attacks on a piece on e5, but f4 does it, and then I think knight d3 potentially does it as well. What happens with knight d3? Knight d3, I guess, just leads to kind of strategic advantages, moving the pawn to b7, that kind of stuff. Would it be possible for knight takes f7 after knight takes d5? Um, yeah, probably. Let's see. So knight takes f7 here, and then rook takes, and then knight takes. Yeah. So yes, that is playable. But it's still a trade of this, relatively important d5 knight for this relatively unimportant f7 knight or f7 pawn. So yes, that is a good tactical response, Aphelion, for sure. But it basically, it still isn't particularly good for white to be trading off these two pawns. The d5 pawn is a better one. Um, yeah, so here knight takes c2, queen takes e2, knight e4, queen t3. Yeah. So basically, the big shift in eval happens when this knight becomes available for attack. The first opportunity it becomes available for attack is here with knight to e4, but then knight takes e7, and I think that might be okay. So let's look at knight. I'm just kind of curious about knight to e4. Knight takes e4. Oh, because the e6. Okay, so it wins based on taking the e6 knight. So d6, d5 threatens this e6 knight, and based on tempo, it doesn't yet allow for that quick discovery. But once the knight moves, now defense of this loose knight is necessary. So that's an opportunity. It's not an easy tactic to see, but that's an opportunity to improve for white. I think just counting out this tempo here, um, it's a tactical improvement. But yeah, when playing d5, don't forget about the defense on this e5 knight. There are many situations where that happens, actually. You get the opportunity to play d5 and remove the defense on the e5 knight if it's posted there. That happens. Yeah, no, for sure, Aphelion. Makes sense. Definitely makes sense to attempt. And it does. It keeps the material equal. It just leads to a positional disadvantage by trading off pawns. Here, White, basically improves on every move as he continues this attack. So here it's about plus point 0.5, b6, bishop d4, bishop b7, and just yeah, pushing the pawns will break open the king side. That's yeah, good news for white. I don't know, maybe there's a better place for black to sort of slow down here. Um, uh, so here black's up. Knight takes, bishop takes, bishop takes, bishop takes, and I guess what's the engine suggesting in terms of responding to this kingside attack? Like e6, I guess. E6 looks pretty dangerous. E6, f takes e6. Oh right, because e6 puts pressure on this diagonal, this fianchetto. So a tactical improvement for black here would be e6. Putting pressure on the d5 pawn. It's complicated because that doesn't really stop the attack either. I mean, this attack for white feels almost unstoppable, right? From this point, h4, h5, pawn takes, rook takes h7 is going to be available for white. Um, and here, yeah, white's better. Uh, cool, interesting. Um, Anyways, overall, this is an interesting situation. Bishop, basically, white gets this big center. His only real slip is in allowing this discovered attack on the knight. But otherwise, capitalizes pretty well. There's pieces traded, and eventually that kingside attack just rolls, and it's good shape. Um, so yeah, interesting. Let's go back one more. Uh, C5, D5, and that knight on E5 is hanging. Okay, cool. Yep, it's a win. I'm seeing if there's any other inefficiencies, but basically, the errors here were pretty much as I've already gone over. That hanging knight on e5 probably was not ideal for white. Uh, Basically, this queenside castling, strong play there. Bishop takes, bishop takes. Yeah, and the attack from white is pretty much overwhelming. Solid, good ideas. I think black's chances are really limited here. This e6 pressure on this pinned pawn is a creative tactical play. But overall, I'm trying to I'm basically trying to look for black's missteps. Um, and I don't really think there were any. I think, or none that were too big. Um, I think we're kind of in an interesting situation with this, where basically, this is what happens when you're playing a large center opening against a flank opening. White just basically had a spatial advantage the entire time. He had better development and better piece play as a result of it, and black never got off. The good pawn breaks that make it that provide compensation in King's Indian defense or uh, other flank openings, Perk Modern. Um, it really shows there's pressure on black. If it's just if basically if the play is equal out of a flank opening versus a central opening, if this basically this plus zero point 0.7 eval goes all the way to the end of the game, that ends up being a win for white. Um, the pressure is on black to equalize, and giving your opponent a space and center advantage is a tricky way to equalize. You're basically relying on one of those large pawn breaks, and if that doesn't happen, then white will win the game. That's pretty much what happened here. Uh, White, got good center play and then a good kingside attack. Black never really found a way to break through a solid white center. White didn't overextend. He wasn't greedy, so it seemed to play out pretty well for him. Interesting game. Solid play by White. The only thing, the only real error was that opportunity for the discovered check. Knight takes d5 with the hanging knight on e5. But short of that, solid game. You managed to avoid any overextension of the center, and you held on to the spatial advantage that White gets out of against the King's Indian defense. You held on to that for the whole game, and Black never equalized. So overall, solid, good play by White, and a smooth win out of modern type theory. Okay, cool. On to the next one. This one is from GG Ghost. GG Ghost is from the chess study group Discord. Really appreciate you sending this one, GG Ghost, and I just want to make sure you play this one as Black, right? You're OP Gamer FTW on chess.com. Okay, cool. All right, so we'll take it from your perspective. Um, okay, so this is interesting. It's a flank opening versus a d4 opening. Um, Black plays an early c5. Um, this is a challenging move for White. I think this is the right kind of idea for Black to play. C5, pawn takes c5, queen a5, and then threats on basically win back the c5 pawn immediately if you want to. So that's definitely good. Here d5 I think probably. Um, Knight c6 is fine, but I would probably just play d5 already, and you've equalized in the center. Um, you know, uh, I guess I would just say I understand the concepts behind them, but I really am sort of stuck on center play as opposed to kind of hyper modern concepts. I think holding a good center allows you to develop your pieces more freely and allows you to control more space. So I'm gonna gravitate towards like moves like d5 over moves like knight c6 in general, just because d5 makes a more current threat to the center. Um, Anyways, that's just sort of an explanation of where my eyes go. Knight c6 is also just fine. This basically is an idea where you get the quick development, and you're probably gonna play d6, but you might play knight b4 and threaten to disrupt White's bishop pair. A few different choices for Black versus White here. So castles and then knight b4 is what's given by the engine. Queen b6 also makes sense to me. D6 actually also makes sense to me. I sort of like d6 just because it supports development of the bishop to g4. Overall, I think basically, Black is in reasonably good shape. Has a slight spatial disadvantage, slight center disadvantage, but is getting close to equalizing out of the flank opening. Okay. Next move. Queen b6, d5. All right. So knight d4 makes sense. And knight b4 also makes sense. I would probably say knight to b4, and then come up with a plan to try to attack this d5 pawn, which looks pretty extended and undefended by other pawns. Um, that's my that's kind of I think I would play that. Um, you played knight d4. Knight d4 is also a completely fine move. Makes sense. D6, you're developing, good. And yeah, knight to e8, rook there, knight f6, and basically, unfortunately, that looks like White gets very good. White has good eyes on this tactical opportunity. Um, But let's slow this down because I don't think this game had to go exactly like this. So here, Queen e5, Bishop e2, d6, Rook e1, and nothing about this seems particularly bad. I think this is all fine. This queen is getting a little bit restricted. So I'm wondering if there was an earlier way to steer away from this. Um, if the queen, because the queen ends up basically getting displaced and trapped, which is not ideal. So here, d6, bishop g4, I think is a way to play this. I think here basically, your emphasis is development. Queen b6 is probably just, queen b6 is not something that the engine particularly dislikes, but I would just say um, this threat is a little bit. I mean, okay, so d5 is played here, and that makes it so that you can't play queen takes b2. Okay, so knight d4 gets played, knight takes, queen takes, and then this b2 never really came under pressure. Because of this, because of the d5 tactical opportunity for white, queen b6 is actually a threat that's dealt with sufficiently. It's you don't. It looks like the type of move where you win a pawn, but it doesn't actually because this pawn moves with a threat, and then you have to deal with the threat, and then you don't get the b2 pawn. So that's so the idea behind this I think was good, and I think from a strategic perspective, definitely by all means look for moves like Queen B6. But I think that in this particular case, it wasn't actually able to be that threat didn't really pan out. So I think a move like D6, which offers you straightforward development, is better than playing a threat that is dealt with. I think I think it's somewhat of a tactical problem. Like, if you see that threat is dealt with d5, you probably don't play queen b6 because you know, between playing a queen move that's dealt with or playing a move that forwards your development, you would choose the move that forwards your development. So queen b6 offers white some tempo in the it basically turns black into defending again. After it appeared that it looks like black's attacking after queen b6, but after d5, black is defending. White's attacking the knight with his pawn. Queen takes, bishop e3, and here I think is probably thematically the biggest kind of error here. Um, this queen gets displaced, but where should the queen go? I guess I would probably say queen to b4. That looks best to me. This at least creates a threat that white will immediately have to deal with. Queen e5 is a centralized knight queen, but the queen does have a lot of mobility on this square. But I think you basically relatively gain a tempo with queen b4 because queen b4 creates a threat that white has to respond to or white should respond to. And then as a result of that extra tempo, you get to play d6 and then get this bishop, which you definitely do need to develop into the game. So from a theoretical perspective, I'd be focused on this. Queen e5 is a move that holds the queen, but Queen b4 is a move that generates an attack that pretty much must be dealt with. So I think there, that is a like positional strategic consideration. Like you really do if you create attack with if you need to move a piece because it's getting attacked. If you create an attack with the moved piece, you will save time relative to moving it to a square where you're not creating an attack. Creating an attack can save you time is the main point there. So this b2 pawn is getting attacked out of b4 or queen b4, but it's not getting attacked out of queen e5. Queen e5, sort of whatever, but queen b4 attacks this pawn and makes white have to spend a move responding to it, and none of the moves responding to it are particularly helpful. So on queen b4, like rook b1, d6, and at least you're moving your development forward. Otherwise, queen e4 you know, bishop e2 or some type of maneuvering. Yeah, so say bishop e2. You play d6, and white has improved his bishop. Um, and the queen's on kind of a square that's similar, if not slightly worse. But conceptually here, I think this is the real, you know, this is an improvement that you can make. This queen b4 threatens a pawn. It requires a response. Queen e5 does not put pressure on white in the same way, and for that reason, it's a slower move. It doesn't allow black to develop his pieces as quickly. So I think that's an improvement. Here, things are still okay. Queen d2, rook c8, bishop takes a7, knight e8, and yeah, I mean, this is yeah, this unfortunately gets really stuck. But I think it mostly has to do with the time spent. Knight c8 is not super helpful. Uh, Conceptually, I get it. Taking off this knight is probably good. But even then, you're basically removing you know, you're removing your fianchettoed bishop for a knight on c3. Like, that's usually not a good trade. Um, so I'm thinking, so just in terms of relative value of pieces here, this bishop for this knight, I think the bishop is generally more valuable. Um, you know, what are the alternatives? This rook e7 probably needs to get dealt with. Probably just rook f8. Uh, you know, rook f e8. That is, yeah, that at least deals with that threat. Uh, but knight e8 and development is kind of suffering. I also don't think this trade, this one right here, it's a misvaluing of the two pieces relative to each other. I think basically on uh, on bishop takes c3, you're trading your dark squared good bishop, which is fianchettoed, for a knight that is, you know, you are creating a benefit in the sense that you're creating doubled pawns on the c file, but this is a valuable bishop to you. I don't think you want to be eliminating it. Yeah, no, for sure, and it does have, you know, it does happen. Volatility definitely happens. Uh, these things do happen. And you know, but the game doesn't end. So you know, it's like you hang two pawns, but the game hasn't finished yet. You know, finding a way to maintain your composure is an important concept. Um, but yeah, I think this move, you know, basically is more. I'm sort of more focused on. This, you know, this should be identifiable as a better idea than this, because of this extra tempo that you're getting. Um, but yeah, anyways, I think, you know, basically, yeah, that is a bummer. This bishop takes bishop takes a7 is difficult. Um, but yeah, I think both of these pawns, you know, basically they became undefended and got taken. This one on a7 and this one on e7, which is yeah, which is a bummer. I know that feeling when, you know, it's sort of slipping away. How do you kind of maintain composure? Tough question. And But you know, these are, I think this is mostly an attention issue. Like, you know, you know that rook c8 is going to hang the a7 pawn. So you know, if you slow down and if you slow down, you will not make that same error again. But how, you know, how do you actually screen out that type of issue? I think your best chance is just general tactic. Yeah, no, no, for sure. Well, and you definitely do want to put that rook on the semi-open file like that. You know, that's a good idea. But it's like, you know, I think if you just I think b6, you know, becomes a lot more clear. It's certainly in retrospect, like b6 is more clear, but um yeah, you know, just hanging stuff. How, you know, how do you stop hanging things? My solution to that was always tactical study, which, you know, is, I think, at least an indirect way to do that. You know, maybe People say blitz can help with that, but I don't know. But those types of things where you're just hanging pawns, they're frustrating. We all make them, and they're frustrating errors to make. But I think unfortunately they're sort of responsible for this game. These two pawns are a real amount of material. You definitely didn't want to lose those if you didn't have to. Um, so I guess at the end of the day, what guidance like can I provide here? Like, I think queen to b4 is better than queen to e5 for conceptual reasons. You create an attack versus you're not creating an attack, and you're gaining time by creating attack versus not creating time by gaining an attack. Um, but in terms of hanging a7 and hanging e7, which are the problems, black's biggest missteps in this game, I really feel like that's just sort of an attention thing. I don't know what everyone has their own sort of way of dealing with those types of attention issues in chess. How do you reduce mistake making? Um, but my strategy, it's a very blunt force response, is just study your tactics. Do an hour of tactical study a day for a month. You will make fewer errors like that. And I guess, I don't know, get some sleep. Things that increase your general attention span are the most important. But it's up to you. But it's a bummer because they do swing games. I mean, you played a pretty solid game as black. You basically played into the middle game without any real issues. Your pieces are fine. You're about to have open files for your rooks. But two pawns hung will swing a lot of games against you. So, um, unfortunately, I think tactical study is the best response to that. Others may have better suggestions in terms of in terms of establishing ideas for missing, for basically preventing you missing one move tactics. But I'm not sure they're chess related. I think they're generally focus related. Um, Doing tons of tactical puzzles will also increase your focus. But focus is the biggest takeaway here. Um, the biggest chess related takeaway that I can make is that conceptually creating that attack on b2 means a better developing square for your queen. Overall, thank you very much for sending the game, Ghoul Ghost. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, it's really interesting. Please send more games. I'm super interested in looking them over. I think tactical study is probably the next step for you in terms of improving. But you played a good game. It basically, you know, the errors that you made were not really on the chessboard at the end of the day. And I think you can work on those. The first one being, relax and get some sleep. I think is probably very broad guidance for that. Um, One move tactics. I mean, we all miss them from time to time, but they're definitely something that you want to eliminate from your game because they will change outcomes. Overall, thank you very much, Cool Ghost. I hope that was at least somewhat helpful, and thank you very much for sending in the game and for participating. Very interesting to look at. Got to learn a little bit about some of these flank openings. And yeah, I really hope I hope that's helpful, and I hope you have a good next step on your chess improvement route. Thanks. Next game. Um, yeah, no, I think it's really about focus. Playing with I think mainly that move about the queen threatening getting the extra tempo by threatening the b4 pawn. Having a more purposeful queen move there definitely makes sense. But I think in general, like tactics, and maybe even particularly fast tactics, like in puzzle battle or quick time tactic trainers, will help you reduce the number of one move errors in your game. Uh, it's been helpful for me, but it's far from the only solution to that type of problem. Thank you very much for that, Ghoul Ghost. All right. Next game. This is one between Anch and RV Phil. Anch plays e4, c6, bishop c4. Okay. Anch likes to play bishop c4 in a lot of his games. I also like to play bishop c4 in a lot of my games. But it is objectively true that bishop to c4 is much more valuable after e5. Bishop to c4 is a good idea and attacks the weakest spot on the blackboard right off the bat. So that is definitely something that is helpful. But at the end of the day, bishop e4, if e5 hasn't been played, can be stopped with e6, and with e6, basically this bishop is not on a great diagonal anymore. Um, Good question, Jack. At various points, it's been very serious. There have definitely been times when I've been, Jen will tell you because she knows, but I've definitely had days where I've played 4 to 8 hours of tactics at once. Like it is, I have had days like that. Uh, I haven't been as consistent as I'm recommending generally. 1 hour a day for a month is something that's manageable, but it's not necessarily the most it's one tag one it's not it's you need a good routine to do that. So I actually haven't been as steady as the routines that I'm recommending. I think the routines that I'm recommending are optimal, and I would do them if I could, or if I could carve out the time for that. But I have done tons of tactics training. But it can sometimes be in these like huge bursts where I have like the TV on one side, or I'm doing like doing 6 hours of tactics in front of the TV is something that Jen can definitely confirm that I have done at various points in time, and it really is helpful. The last time that I really did a very hardcore tactics regime was before my tournament in Arkansas last year, where I probably did 6 hours of tactics a day for 5 days the week before the tournament. Um, so like on Saturday, Sunday, I knew I was going to play this tournament that I wanted to win, and then the week before, I studied tactics 6 hours a day for 5 days, and then and then by the time I was playing that tournament, I was playing extremely well. If you do that kind of thing, I guarantee you will improve. That will be very good for your tactical game, and it will be very good for your game in general. Um, but a more manageable thing to do, especially if you have a fixed routine or set empty time periods, is that hour a day for a month. I that will be helpful for you for sure. Um, but yeah, I think Jen can vouch for how many tactics I do out of frustration. Um, Bishop c4 I think is too early here. Bishop c4 is stronger after e5. E6 and the bishop c4 can be somewhat misplaced. This happens sometimes, and the Caro-Kann it can happen as well. D5 will push that bishop back to b3 or e2, and neither of those is particularly good squares. Yeah. I think the best idea is definitely moderation, Jack. Um, but you put in time where you can as well. Just make sure that you actually do it. Pawn takes d5, pawn takes d5, bishop b3, knight f6, d4, bishop f5, and basically here, this bishop is not really on a great diagonal. Why not play d5 straight away and skip e6? Um, yeah, I think that's objectively better. That's what the engine is suggesting, Kira. Same general concept, no e6 needed. Uh, yeah, I like it. Um, or maybe even d5 pawn takes. Yeah, I think d5 is probably better. Pawn takes bishop b3, knight f6, d4, bishop f5. Okay, cool. But yeah, so now the bishop's kind of misplaced. This bishop's a little bit blocked in. If Jen wants guacamole, Jen can make guacamole for tonight. Glad you redeemed your credits for that, Jen.
I have 22,000.
You have 20.
Nothing to buy
Uh, well, I think my emoji's gonna cost some amount of credits or something. I don't know, or maybe not. I don't know. Okay. Um. Anyways, bishop b6, d4, bishop f5, e6. Um, yes, that option is under consideration for sure. We need to pick out the hat. But yeah, so here knight c6, knight b5, queen d7, castles, and black has a pretty good position. Black has basically set it up so that he has more center control. This c pawn ended up getting traded for this e pawn, so black's central pawns will be better, and he'll be able to use that center control to make the rest of his game easier to play. This structure is solid for black. Um, Bishop g5, bishop e7, knight f3, h6. Um, yeah. Here, you know, knight c6, knight b5. Yeah, I mean, I think white sort of needs a plan here. I think this wasn't a great, strategy. This knight b5, queen d7, knight c3 idea, I think was not a great use of time for white. Basically, if you look at this situation here, so say this situation here before move 12, it's white to move. But now with the knight on the same square, white having pieces in exactly the same place, it's black to move. So that sort of trade just sort of it basically lost a tempo for white. I'd come up with a more kind of large plan here. So maybe like rook to e1 could be an improvement. Um, it's hard. Black's position here is actually very solid. Um, Maybe knight to e2 with rook c1 and c4 in mind. Maybe. But this is tricky. I guess maybe repositioning the knight to g3 could also be an idea. But knight to b5 is sort of a standalone tactic, and I think having a bigger plan behind that is important. Castles, bishop a4, knight e5. This is all fine, but white hasn't equalized. White's significantly worse in the center, and basically, yeah, it's tricky. Um, I guess maybe you're supposed to start playing moves like, F rook e1 to rook g3 and then get attack on g7, maybe. But fortunately, black makes a tactical error here, allowing this discovery. So knight takes d5, queen d6, knight takes f6, queen, and then the game pretty much ends. Um, so that game was decided on a little bit of a tactical mishap. Definitely happens. Definitely interesting. But yeah, that was uh, you know interesting. One other thing is it looks like uh, Karakhan. Yeah. But yeah, I don't think Bishop C4 is the strongest idea here for White. Other than that, White plays a good game. But with that Bishop misplaced, he's sort of playing from behind for a lot of it, which is not ideal. I think this knight to b5, queen to d7, knight to c3. It's an idea, but it wasn't enough of a complete plan. It basically turned the exact same. So here, white has the pieces in a specific organization, and then here, white has the pieces in exactly the same formation, and it's black to move. So that kind of movement lost a tempo. Um, this I thought was reasonable. And then black makes a tactical error, and white wins. And good tactical execution. I mean, this was the correct way to play this. I mean, seeing knight takes d5 is possible, but you need to actually do it to win this game. Um, After all this, yeah, it's a win for white. But I guess when revisiting this game, or to take instructional value out of this, Bishop c4 is a stylistic thing, but not not a good placement of the bishop prior to e5 having been played. Uh, the next thing to think, and basically, this results in trading the e pawn for the c pawn, which is going to give black good central control. Uh, Here, black's basically slightly up. This move order with the knight, I think, was not a good use of time. Um, and bishop takes c2. This was a good thing for white to capitalize on, allowed a winning tactic. Um, but at the end of the day, those are the takeaways. Revisit bishop c5 prior to e5 in openings. Um, I feel pretty strongly about that one. Uh, Second, have a more complete plan than just basically move. Basically, unless you have a really good reason to knock the queen off d6. Going back there and going back. Yeah, I think that's what it's called, Jack. Probably not the best. Yeah, I mean, it's just I don't think the best idea. Yeah, I think that's what this one is called. But yeah. Anyways, I think that opening can be improved. But I think you're on the right track. I mean, it felt like you got a good tactical win going into the end, and at the end of the day, too, tactics will solve many problems for you. Many lost or losing games will become wins if your tactical vision gets good enough. Those opportunities really are there against class level players for sure. Keep tactics in mind. I'll have my tactics emoji available for you guys soon. It really is important at class level. It will win you a lot of games and give you some big improvements. All right, on to the next one. This one is Mikey playing white. We will look at this. Okay, so Mikey is white, and he plays 1d4 and bishop f4. London system. Okay, London system is pretty solid. I think that's a fine opening. Knight d5 is aggressive. Probably not useful to move the same piece twice in an opening. And then I think the correct response here is bishop to g3. Your bishop pair definitely is worth something, and I think you're gonna want this e pawn later for moving to e4 to kick that knight off and expand your center there. E3, sort of diminishes your center after knight takes f4. You don't have an e pawn. The e5 pawn or square is very well defended, but the d5 pawn loses out when you lose the e pawn on e4. So bishop g3 I think is an improvement. This is all good. Yeah, straightforward developing moves. Good. Good fork, good tactic. And yeah, this looks pretty good. Nice. Okay. Yeah. The things that I would think about here are first, I think there is value in keeping the bishop on the board. Sometimes you do have to trade off a bishop for a knight in the opening, but in this particular case, especially since this knight has moved twice, you have the ability to move the bishop out of the way and maintain your bishop pair. The bishop's not great on g3, but it's okay on g3. It's not ideal, but it will be okay, and it will maintain an attack on this somewhat vulnerable c7 pawn. Here, knight takes, pawn takes, d5, c3, e6, knight d2, bishop d6, and yeah, this all makes sense. G3 is a necessary move to defend the f4 pawn. And then yeah, knight e5 makes sense. F6 does not make sense. It swings the game by about 7 points, and then you capitalize on the tactic. and then it's all the game is basically pretty clearly in white's favor from there. So for sure, good win. Yeah, let's learn this opening a little bit better because I'm sort of curious to see how often this knight e5 move happens. Bishop e4 definitely happens a lot, but knight e5 is actually I think totally out of the book. And was it no bishop h6 was second, and then knight e5. So let's see how often is knight. So h6 is already somewhat an unusual move. Here, the most usual move is d5, making the center pawn symmetrical, or g6, trying to get his bishop to the fianchetto diagonal. h6 is somewhat unusual. Knight f3 and knight to e5, and then bishop to g3 is your response. There's not much. There's nothing in the opening theory already. After knight f3, knight e5 takes you completely out of the opening book. No, I think mating puzzles in general are good. I think all of it, just seeing how the pieces work together in a tactical puzzle will help your vision. At this point, it might not be a mating attack, but you'll know how to coordinate your rook and knight in the same way that in a way similar to a mating attack. The main I really just I'm a huge believer in the value of puzzles at class level. Like I really think they will move you they will move you up in terms of rating. Class players play games that sometimes are very theoretically correct, but are super volatile because pieces are hanging frequently. And if you're training as tactical puzzles, then you will have a lot less of that volatility and win those games where your opponent's giving you those opportunities. So yeah, I think I wouldn't necessarily say that it should only be mating puzzles, Squash. I think mating puzzles are important. I would mix them in with other tactics as well, but all tactical study is good. Certainly, playing only mating puzzles isn't going to make you worse. You could probably do nothing but mate in threes forever, and you wouldn't get worse at chess. You would just probably only get better at those specific mating puzzles. So I'd say a mix, Squash. But the fact that you're doing tactical study in puzzles in the first place means you're on the right track, I think. Here, White basically has to play chess. There's no opening theory for this. So bishop g3 is an improvement on e3 because it holds on to the bishop pair. But that said, e3 is fine. White's probably about close to equal here. Black's primary advantage is having that extra, yeah, no, I think that's the way to go, Squash. I mean, if you're an A player or a class player, you can definitely you definitely have room to improve on your tactics. Um, so pawn takes f4, e6, g3, knight e5, and you've basically turned this unusual opening into a good opportunity to win on the king side. Assume it doesn't swing back towards black's direction. But yeah, so in this Indian game, what are the main lines actually? Bishop f4 and d5 makes the center symmetrical. Knight f3, c5, e3, knight c6, c3. This is sort of the more conservative, solid foundation that can go with the London system. This is good. I mean, it's a little bit like I guess I would say it's sort of like the Caro-Kann is black, right? I mean, isn't the Caro-Kann sort of like this, where you have like the bishop on f5 and then these three pawns like this, uh, which is solid. Basically all the pawns defend each other. The pieces have natural places to develop. Um, and I think in general, there is an opportunity for the knight to play h5, but I think on knight h5, bishop to g3 is still the best idea. I think as a general concept, trading this, if you're forced to trade this dark squared bishop for the knight, which I definitely think is possible in the London game, you should do it with bishop g3 and then knight takes g3. And that I think is gonna is the better way to trade off that bishop. You play h takes g3, your rook gets more mobility, and your center doesn't get diminished. This normal London system, white has a really solid center. Good placement of pieces, and a good opportunity to move this white squared bishop out as well. So yeah, overall good stuff. Black basically plays something very unusual, and the biggest guidance that I can think of is, I mean, it does right. You have that bishop on f4 and the pawns on e3, d4, and c3. So yeah, I think it basically is with extra tempo. Caro-Kann is a solid opening. I mean, if it's a solid formation to have the pawns set up that way. Uh, the black king pawn is, yes, that is true. Yeah, so there's it's basically like the Caro-Kann except with not the same amount of pressure. Uh, you're not getting pressured by the e pawn in the same way that you're not getting pressured by the e pawn in the same way that you are in the Caro-Kann out of the London system. But yeah, in terms of pawn structure, it's pretty similar. Uh, okay. So yeah, so I think here, with black basically taking you out of theory, play bishop g3. It is not ideal to have to move your piece twice in the same piece twice in an opening. But your opponent did it, so that means it's probably not too terrible if you do it as well. You have a little bit more latitude to do it. Um, and then otherwise, yeah, from here, move 7 or move 10. I guess move 10. You win a rook and you win, which is awesome. It's great. It's great that the tactic was there. It's great that you saw the tactic, and it's a win. So the only thing that I can practically advise you when you're considering you're playing such an unusual opening is I think bishop to g3 is better. I think trading off a bishop in g3 is generally better than trading off a bishop on f4 in most openings. Largely just because it doesn't diminish your center. This center lacking an e pawn is not as good as a center where you still have an e pawn but you have a doubled pawn on g3. If that's the alternative. So moves like bishop g3 to avoid trading the knight for the bishop are worthwhile. And this is a situation where I think it might have been. So yeah. So thanks for very much for sending that in, Mikey. But I think that's a piece of advice that I would give on this game. I think bishop to g3, avoiding this trade off of your bishop pair, is worth the extra move here. Um, Otherwise, what happened worked out really well, and White deserves to win for sure. Um, but that's just a slight potential improvement in case you encounter a similar position in the future. Very interesting. All right, on to the last game of the night. This is Kiro, a game that Kiro plays as black, and I am very interested in looking at it. It's a Russian game. Okay. And let's take it from black's perspective. Yeah. So here, it's a Petrov's defense. Okay, interesting. D6 main line. Knight takes e4, d3, and a symmetrical position. Very much the Petrov's game. The main move here is d4, making the most immediate play for the center. But bishop e2 is also sometimes played by white. General developing moves. White has to choose between developing moves or solidifying the center. That's what's up to it's up to him which he prefers. Knight c6, I don't have any problem with here. Sometimes I get reluctant to play knight c6 because I feel like it blocks in c7, but that's usually in a situation where I'm trying to undermine the d4 pawn and my pawn's on d5. Here, I think that c5 as a general move is probably not as valuable as it could be. So I wouldn't be too reluctant to play knight c6 here. I think knight c6 here is fine, even though it does somewhat make the c7 pawn backward, and a little bit stuck. But here, yeah, knight c6, h3 makes sense. Um, Castles makes sense. D5 makes sense. So you've chosen to be, I like D5. D5 is the move that makes the quicker attempt at the center control. They were recommending that, the opening book recommends that white plays D4 immediately after all these trades. But black plays it first in this situation. Either making this play for the center with d5 or developing the pieces is something that both sides should do. Interesting. Basically, the rook plays to e1, threatening discovered check, but the bishop doesn't really help. Yeah, thank you very much for joining the stream, Squash. Yeah, thank you very much for coming by, and if you have any games up for review, please send them. Thanks. Yeah, thank you for watching. So bishop to d6, bishop to f1 offers discover check, bishop to e6, um, knight to g5, castles, knight takes, and here I think the engine is suggesting knight to d4, but e5 looks pretty intuitive to me. Basically, eliminating this weakest point. Here after knight takes e6, the weakest point is e6. I assume that rook take. I'm just trying to figure out what's wrong with rook takes e6 here. I guess rook takes e6, and then like knight, queen to d7. Okay, and then the queen has to move. Or the rook has to move. Oh, okay. So basically, extending this, queen d6 or queen d7 forces the rook back, or to trade for the d6 bishop. And if the rook doesn't take the d6 bishop, then knight to g4 can be played. Interesting tactic. Castles, queen e2, knight to d4, queen d1. Hey, welcome, FIFA boy. How are you? But yeah, so bishop f1 is a discovery. Castles and knight to d4. H5, bishop takes h2. And yeah, I mean, this looks pretty strong. This is a quickly, this attack on the king side really got, motivated pretty quickly. So, yeah, no, h5 was a good idea. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, bishop takes h2, knight g4, and you're in pretty good shape. Yeah, I think that was a really well executed. No, for sure, Kira. I think that was a really well executed attack. I'm just looking at like king h3, but nah, there's nothing. Hey, there you go. Awesome. Hey, FIFA boy figured out how to use it. Awesome. Okay, everybody. That is the new graphic that Jen made me. This tactics icon. My goal is to use it like less than 30 times per lesson. Uh, uh, but it is a you guys should feel free to use it as much as you want. My goal is to need to use it as little as possible. I'm always harping on how much everyone needs to do tactics. And I think you guys should remind me every time I say tactics with like that graphic or something like that. It's pretty much it's such an overarching theme of what I talk about that I felt like, or Jen at least felt like I needed my own graphic to correspond to it. So in case you think I talk about it too much, you can pile on to that as well. No, I like it. I don't know. It's up to you. It's really cool. It was super nice of Jen to make it. Uh, we'll see. Okay. Computer says -13, but is it really bad? I was thinking after queen takes g4, black can trade the queen. Okay. Yeah, let me look. Okay, so here's the first. So that was the first one. Interesting. Yeah, white can trade the queen for three minor pieces. Um, yeah. Uh, the only issue it looks like is that that the attack doesn't end after queen takes g4. But good point. Materially, yeah. Because three pieces is usually worth the queen. That actually usually wins for the person who gets three pieces for the queen. But the issue is that the queen takes g4, pawn takes d4, and the f2 pawn is still open for attack. So situationally, you conceptually good, Kiro, for sure. But at the end of the day, specifically in this position, it's not tactically playable. Um, Interesting. Uh, okay. But yeah, but I think I think h5 was an excellent move, Kiro. Definitely want to make sure I give credit to that move because that was a really good idea. Here, I'm thinking White's, what's White's best. H5 was a great move, by the way. Totally want to give credit there. Um, but what is White's best response to this? It's probably bishop to e2. I think some of White's problems are stemming from the king not having an escape square. Um, but uh, but yeah, this uh, that's awesome. Uh, well, yeah, but except they don't. You know, you didn't play it for no reason. You played it for a very well constructed reason, which is supporting this knight g4. I mean, in many attacks like this, you can play knight g4 with the idea that it's defended, by this e6 bishop. But since you don't have that e6 bishop, it's great that you can supplement it with. I do, yes, yeah, uh, yeah, but no, it's really nice of Aphelion to get the subscriptions for everybody. That was super thoughtful. And it was nice of Jen to make the graphic as well. That was nice. Oh, there you go. There you go. You got it. Um, the most common emoji that I will ever see now. Uh, that's awesome. Okay. Here, this is pretty. It's good for black. Black basically, on h5. Let's see if h5 gets a best because I think it deserves one. Um, h5. So bishop e2, knight takes e2, rook takes e2, knight g4 is still a really big problem for white actually. F4, uh, e5 or bishop takes e4 or queen h4. But yeah, no, it was a great idea, Kiro. Good tactical maneuver. Yeah, no, it is a good idea. It's one of those kind of slow evolving tactical maneuvers that are difficult to see. But the knight is so important to this attack, right? That yeah, yeah. If you have any more emote ideas, Jen likes to do drawing, and it's super nice of her to do some drawings. So that yeah. Um, I feel like Aphelion might deserve a mod ship if he wants one. To be completely honest. But that's yeah, that's just an idea. Um, but here, yeah, h5 I thought was really good, Kiro. Knight g4. Yeah, no, good idea. Good advancing. But yeah, let's go back here. Is there any real improvement for black? I mean, it's mainly just a strong game out of the Petrovs. D5 you played at the right time. Mixing it with knight c6 is the right general concept. Bishop f1, gave a discovered attack. And honestly, from the eval perspective, you were never worse. And yeah, you got a very strong tactic to winning on the king side. Um, yeah, well, let's think. What are the other mating nets here? Um, the other mating nets. Yeah. Well, no, I mean it's great. I mean, I'm sure before you played bishop takes h2, you had everything after knight g4 calculated. So let's for the sake of this, and because I think this tactic is good, very good. Let's look at the different mates that were here. So king h1, very straightforward. Queen h4, queen h2. Okay. The second one, king g1, queen h4, and now he has a few options. So g3, queen h2 mate. F3, queen h2 mate. Bishop f2, queen h2, king f1, queen h1 mate. Um, queen takes g4 is probably the only move that doesn't immediately lead to mate, but that loses enough material that uh, so yeah, actually maybe this was the oh wait, queen g4. Maybe this is the right time to play queen h4, queen takes g4. It's still a mate, though. Yeah, then you just do something like that. Okay, so there's a lot of threats there. King h3, knight takes f2, and certainly you lose the queen, so you're better. And then king g3. Yeah, king g3 is the only line that I was looking at, but I'm pretty sure it's still busted. I think knight to f5. Knight to f5, king to f3. Yeah. Well, yeah, but let's see. This is still tricky. What really is it's interesting. Um I guess this. Yeah, there you go. I mean, certainly that wins. Huh. But yeah, no, that's really cool. It's awesome that I'm sure you looked at everything before you played bishop takes h2. So, good work with that. Uh No, no worries. No, no. Well, I mean, I think it was better for white. I think it just wasn't. I think white just has nothing, nothing after bishop takes h2. I think bishop takes h2 is seriously just a forced win. From an eval perspective, here black's already showing a huge advantage because knight g4 is going to be crazy dangerous no matter what. Best response is bishop to e2. But on a knight takes e2, rook takes or queen takes, knight g4 coming, and threats on h2 are you know dangerous and winning. So I don't know. I mean, looks pretty good. Nothing. Yeah, nothing. Nothing. White could do really. To be honest. Uh, you know, I mean, a lot. I think a lot of moves here. So let's look at this. Let's look at it this way: bishop takes h2, king takes h2, knight to d4. Um, I want to calculate that line out. Like, what if you did it without h5? Or were there any other? Yeah, no, for sure, Kiro. No, thanks. This is a super interesting game. I'm just thinking. Uh, Castles, knight takes e6, pawn takes e6. And then the bishop takes h2 line here already. I'm most curious about. King takes h2, knight to d4, queen to d1. Oh, and then you just end up playing h5 anyways. Okay. Yeah, but yeah, finding h5, the move that supports the very powerful knight g4. That's the move. Yeah, good work. Yeah, you needed to introduce that piece into the attack, and there was no other way to do it. So you played h5, and it worked. So yeah, good idea. Not much I can offer in terms of this game. This was really solid. Uh, Errors for white, maybe. Yeah. Uh, I yeah, errors for white. I don't really know. I mean, knight takes e6 is probably a little bit imprecise, but or queen e2. I guess queen e2 is the error. Rook takes yeah, I mean, this I don't think it was bad, but it was probably just passive. Getting this you get this free tempo, but the bishop doesn't really have a great place here. You know, basically the only move that was actually even playable for, you know, unless you wanted to play d4, which was probably white's best strategy. I guess probably d4 and then move the bishop along this diagonal. But if white doesn't want to play d4, bishop f1 is sort of required to get the open rank for the rook. Um, but yeah, I think from here, um, yeah, queen e2 is the misstep. You know, a better line I think was rook takes, queen d7, rook takes d6, and then at least the threats are a little bit less immediate. But I don't know. Um, yeah, looks like a win. Yeah, yeah. No, you're right, Kiro. I mean, it's not great. You know, it just there weren't many ways to improve the rook. I mean, there's basically no other place the bishop can go without playing d4. So the solution to that should just be play d4, which you know I'm sure the engine likes and I'm sure works. So yeah, so d4 is the solution. Um, but yeah, that very quickly got out of control for black. No doubt about it. Pawn takes e6. G3, I guess, is probably an idea that white can use to sidestep some things. But yeah, overall, it's funny. Those pieces really work well for the dark squared bishop works super well. The rook on the open file works super well. And the knight, you know, if it can be supported with h5, uh, just very quickly gets mobilized. Um, okay, yeah, no, basically, but I think actually the error here was queen to e2. Of all the moves, you know, basically this is a very good game for black. There's not much I can add to black's game, but in terms of white's game, queen e2, when you think about it, was kind of pointless, and that's really I guess where the error was. So after pawn takes e6, queen e2, knight to d4, and knight d4 basically completely refutes queen e2. Um, you know, White's unlucky that he played an inefficient move in a position where Black's pieces were so you know able to attack immediately. But that was the only error in this game, and it was a very quiet error to make. So like something like c3, I think, followed by queen e2 maybe, you know, creates a lot less of a problem. You know, maybe still, I guess bishop takes h2, but I feel like the attack is refutable now. I feel like the fact that you know, black was able to get his knight to d4 with tempo was what really killed here. You know, basically, knight threatens queen, queen moves back immediately, knight stays posted on the square and supports the attack. Uh, yeah, but that was really one error, you know. That otherwise it was just a really sharp position that allowed for quick and accurate attack for black. But that's where white slipped up. He played a move that basically got refuted on knight d4, and that allowed black to advance his attack very quickly. So that's what it was. It took me a while to figure that out, um, yeah, knight d4 crushes queen e2 is the main point. Um, Interesting. Great attack, really good, strong Kiro. I don't have much to add in terms of improvement to that game. Just sort of a pretty good attack. I think I'm gonna wrap up the stream. Thank you all very much for joining. Yeah, if Jen has any, if any of you guys have any ideas for new emojis for Jen, yeah, you know, those things happen, Kiro. I don't know. I don't. And yeah, maybe we should create a new place in the Discord for emote ideas. Um, yeah, if you guys have new emote ideas, we can add them. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Kiro. Yeah, those hate messages, those are ridiculous. You know, honestly, I just one of these things I just don't. I just don't really respect bad behavior. Is the main point. I don't do it myself, and I don't. Yeah, just disregard it. I just feel like being. I feel like meanness shows weakness, and that's helped me to get through a lot of times when uh when people have been yeah. No, that too. I get that. I get that temptation as well. But normally if you know normally if your opponent is talking trash, you've already won. Is my thinking, at least. But anyways, it was a great win for you, Kiro. Really cool how those tactics got mobilized that quickly, and good job. Um, uh, so yeah, thank you all very much for joining the stream. Next stream is 10 a.m. Tomorrow morning, and yeah, really excited to see you guys there. We already have a full slate, but please keep sending your games because we always have open slots going forward. And yeah, thanks a lot. Have a good one, guys. Have a good one. Thanks. Good night.